video we're going to be looking at if, elif, and else conditions. So let's start off by relating what are conditions in Python and what are conditions in real life, right? So conditions in real life, we use them everywhere, okay? So for example, let's just say you take your wallet, you forgot to check how much money you have in it, and you go to a store, and then you realize that you don't know how much money you have in your wallet, so you have three things in your mind. In case you have $10 in your wallet, you buy vegetables. In case you have $20, you buy vegetables and meat, okay? In case you have $30, you buy vegetables, meat, and snacks, okay? So those are where you're using conditions. So you're saying that if this happens, if this is how much money I have, this is what's going to take place. So if this is how much money I have, this is what's going to take place. So that's what conditions are. So that is how you can define conditions in a simple definition. Same exact thing applies in Python, right? So if this is what's taking place, this has to be executed. If this is what's going on, this has to be executed, okay? So that's how you can use conditions in Python. So let's start off with the if condition. Right, as I said, there's types of conditions in Python. There's if, elif, and else, right? So those are the three main types of conditions in Python. We're going to go over each one of them in this video so you understand them, and at the end we'll use a good example to represent all three of those conditions, okay? First step, let's understand what's an if condition. To understand what's an if condition, we have to write it down first, and then I'll explain it while we're writing it down. So first of all, you have to say if to mention Python that you're writing an if condition, okay? And after that, you have to put a space and then your condition, right? So you can place whatever condition you want, right? And then a colon, which is part of the syntax. You have to place a colon after your condition. Now, there's one important thing about understanding about this condition, right? So that is where this if condition will only be executed as long as that condition is true. In case that condition is false, it won't be executed. So that's a very important point that you need to know about if conditions. And remember when I said if this happens, this has to happen? So this is what exactly I mean. So if this condition is true, this is always what Python is going to think. If this condition is true, we have to do something, right? So we have to do something, and where do we decide, where do we write what has to happen if this condition is true? You have to write it inside the if condition. So you have to go under the if condition, right? And then leave a few spaces and make sure it's not lining. All you have to really do is make sure it's not lining up with it, or it won't count as in part of the if condition. So you have to make sure it's inside. So that's the indentation. And you can just print whatever you want or do whatever you want in this. You can make a for loop or a while loop, you know, you can do all sorts of stuff, but I'm just going to make it nice and simple and put a print statement in, and then we're going to print something like if condition, okay? So that's what I'm going to print if this condition is true. Now let's go ahead and actually place a proper condition, because this is not a condition. I'm just put that there just to represent condition, okay? So what condition should we put in here? Right, the condition I think I want to put here is if maybe something like 2 is greater than maybe like 1, okay? So that's a true condition, right? So, and hopefully our if condition will get executed. Okay, let's go to our thing here and pull that up. As you can see, it says if condition because that condition I put there is true. Now let's also look at what happens when I place a false condition there, okay? Something like if 2 is greater than 10, okay? So we know that's a false condition, and automatically Python realizes that and then shows us an error, like a warning. It highlights this yellow because it's saying that there's no point of placing this if condition because it's never going to be true. So that condition is never going to be true, so there's no point of placing this piece of code, okay? So let's run it either way, and as you can see, it won't print anything. So that's how you can use if conditions, right? So it's not just this is very simple. These are very basic. When I mean basic, really basic. Let's just get a little bit more complex, and then we'll move on to the next condition, and then at the end we'll move on to something a bit more complex, okay? So let's use variables for this, because most of the time in if conditions you're going to be using variables to represent the condition, okay? And maybe you have a variable like language, okay? So programming language. And in that variable, in that particular variable, you have a string, and that string basically represents the language, right? A programming language. So I'm gonna just put Java in there, okay? So why not Java? And what I want to really do is basically check if the programming language has the value of Java, and in case that it does have the value of Java, I want to print that the programming language is Java. How do I do that? Right, so for that I need to use an operand, right? So remember we learned about operands and how to check values of variables. We have to use that, which is double equal to, if you remember, right? And then I have to put my variable name or whatever I think is equal to this on the left hand side. So I'm just gonna put programming language, and I'm gonna check if that programming language has the value of Java, the string Java, right? So I'm just going to put Java here, and then automatically what if the if condition is going to do is check if the programming language has the value of Java, right? And then I said I wanted to print the programming language is Java in case it is. So I'm just going to say the programming language is Java. Okay, so that's that. And now I've wrote an if condition. Let's see what happens when I execute this code. Right, it says the programming language is Java. Okay, so here comes the exciting part. Now I'm going to put Python as our programming language. Okay, and let's see if this still prints the programming language is Java. As you can see, it does not, right? So that's good. Our if condition is only working if that condition is true, as I told you, okay? So because at the end, in this example, this condition is going to be leaded up to false, right? So there's no point of putting this line of code, right? So now, let's move on to the next condition, right? So this condition is very interesting, in my opinion, because here, right? Let's relate to this example here. When I put Python as my programming language, it says it doesn't say anything, right? So that's not, I want to know what language I have in there, right? So maybe I want to also check if the programming language is equal to Python in case, right? So what I want to do is, first of all, check if the programming language is equal to Java, and in case it's not, I want to go ahead and check if the programming language is equal to Python, in case, right? So in case it's not. So for that, do I just place another if condition? Yes, you can, but there's no point, because in case let's just say you place another if condition, okay? So, and then you say the programming language, in case the programming language is equal to the string Python, okay? And then what you want to do is print the programming language is equal to Python, okay? So that's what we wanted to do. So programming language is Python, okay? So yeah, you can do that. But is that really the way to do it? Because, right, so when you do this, yeah, it will say the programming language is Python if I put Python, and if I put Java, it will say that the programming language is Java. But it's not the right way to do it, because you see, if you place two if conditions, you're automatically telling Python to execute the next if condition even if the first condition is true. So that's not what a programmer would do, right? So what's the point of executing this if condition if you already know that the programming language is Java? So in case this if condition is true, there's no need to execute this if condition, and Python is executing it either way. So that's where Elif comes in, okay? So what Elif does is basically, it's like you're checking, right? You're checking if this if condition is true, and in case that if condition is not true, it will move on to Elif. But in case the if condition is true, it won't go to Elif, right? So for that, for writing an elif condition, it's no different than if. You just have to write an el in front of the in front of the if, right? And that's all. That's your code now, way better than it was before. So let me run this and show you something to you. It will say Java, and if I put Python, it will say the programming language is Python. What's the difference, right? Let me show you the difference, okay? So for a minute, what I'm gonna do is take this. I'm going to take this elif condition off. Let's go back to our previous one, and then what I'm going to do is basically say, in case we know that this is true, right? So I'm going to say if this is true again, okay? So I'm going to say the same if condition exactly here, and I'm going to say Java 2, okay? So what do we think should happen? We know that if this if condition is true, we don't need to, execute this other if condition, right? So when I run this, it says, wait a minute, oops, okay, I need to place Java here, okay? So when I run this, it will say the programming language is Java, and it will again say the programming language is Java, but there's no point of that, right? We only want this condition, next condition, to execute in case this condition is false, but it's executing either way. That's not what we want to happen, right? So when we put elif here, watch what happens. It only says the programming language is Java once, because this elif condition is automatically going to say, okay, you're executed, so your condition is true, so I'm not going to bother you and come in your way, okay? So this will only execute as long as the if condition is not true. So you can place as many elif conditions as you want after you write one elif. So in case, so maybe you put Python here. Let's put Python back here, and let's change this language to Python again. And you can, now let's just say you have Java, right? And then in case the programming language is not, right, Java, and then you go into elif, and in case the programming language is not equal to Python as well, so it's not Python as well, you can write another elif condition to represent something else. Maybe write a programming language, and next time is equal to JavaScript, okay? So maybe this time it might be JavaScript. You want to check for that as well, okay? You can do that as well. You can write as many elif conditions as you want, as well as you can write many if conditions as you want, but there's no point of doing that. You only use more than 2 if conditions in the same place if you want both of the if conditions to execute either way. Okay, so let's write the programming language is Java. Okay, oops, if I can type here, that would be great. JavaScript. Okay, so yeah, now all 3 of them are it's not gonna look at these 2 if conditions, elif conditions, because it knows that this if condition is true, so it's not gonna execute any of these ones. But in case I place Python here, it will say the programming, okay, oops, I don't want a space there. As you can see, it will say the programming language is Python, and in case I place JavaScript here, it will say the programming language is JavaScript. Okay, so that's great, right? So your program is able to tell you what is inside a variable, right? And what condition, and it's able to execute conditions. But if you go in this way, right, there's like hundreds of programming languages, right? So maybe there's hundreds of types of programming languages. We can't just go on placing elifs for all of them. Maybe you only need, right? So this is really important. Understand this, because maybe you have hundreds of programming languages, but you only care about 3 programming languages here: JavaScript, Python, and Java. And you want to only place particular conditions. You want only these languages to have their particular preference as what needs to be done. And for all the other 97 languages, you just want the same thing to happen, right? But for these 3, you want different things to happen. So for the ones that you want to the execution to happen differently, you use if, right? So maybe for Java, you want this to happen, and for Python, you want this to happen, and for JavaScript, you want this to happen. But all the other languages, it has to be only one thing, right? So that's where else comes in. So what else does is it covers all those other 97 languages, and it will execute automatically if these conditions are not true, right? So that means it's none of these languages. It's one of those 97 languages, right? It will cover all those ones. So I will just say print the programming language is one of 97 languages. Okay, so this will happen, this else condition will happen if the programming language is not JavaScript, Python, or Java. Then only this will happen. So if I play something like C, okay, when I run this, it will say the programming language is one of those 97 languages. If I play C++, right, it will say the programming language is one of those 97 languages. And let's make up a language here. Okay, so let's just pretend that Rubik's is a new language, okay? And it will just say that the programming language is one of 97 languages, because it knows that we don't have to even place a condition near else, because it automatically covers all those other conditions. So we don't need to place anything for else. So that's about if, elif, and else. So that's how you can use if, elif, and else.